Mason Rudolph is better.
I forget what you're doing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this strange day. Our first 2-hour delay schedule. Anybody know how much time I got when we're done?
Take your time. Slow down.
I'm making it blue.
Yeah.
I wore my YC sweatshirt yesterday. I felt like a true YC student. I am a YC student. I am that.
Okay, real quick before I start, please stop talking. Does anybody have if it's not real quick, forget it. If anybody can see anything on that screen right now that I could press and make it so it changes things being backwards. If you know what that is, tell me what it is right now. If not, I'm not going to go into a bunch of different experiments. Is there something you see on the screen right now where I could simply press it and it'll change? Wait. I think I just might have remembered.
Why don't you just start writing backwards?
No. There.
See, if you talk your way through it, sometimes it comes back. Wow. Man, you guys are easy to please.
Wait, how do you like doing the new Y setting?
Okay, jeez. What's that?
You like the new Y setting?
Oh, great,
It's
perfect.
beautiful.
You can actually see our team in the second half.
Yeah. That sure would be the funniest.
Okay, for the next 2 days, we'll watch the last 2 sections of. Hopefully, listen. Hopefully, you are getting something out of this. This is firsthand, actual accounts of the things that happened at this awful time in our history. And we're making it a big deal because we don't want to repeat history, right? And you're the future leaders of America. So the hope is that you are educated about what happened. And as the future leaders, you'll be able to make sure it doesn't happen again. And of course, we have to start with ads.
The news came that the Friends' aunt had more sympathy.
Lights, please.
The little lady was crying quietly. She was crying quietly and wringing her hands and walking from room to
By the way, there's
room.
going to be more than just wringing of hands
So
and
that
crying,
was my actual
unfortunately.
memory of that day.
On Tuesday morning, some of the most famous names in corporate America saw their share price plummet. U.S. Steel, Radio, General Motors, stocks that had been symbols of the boom years. On Tuesday, there were tremendous waves of selling that just kept coming. This time, the selling was so powerful and so relentless, there was no lunchtime meeting at JP Morgan. Clearly, the volume of the sales overwhelmed any possibility of the bankers trying to stem the tide.
By evening Tuesday, all American stocks were worth about 22% less than they were when the market opened in the morning on Monday. 36 hours, you lost 22% of the value of American industry.
Hoover was president, and he and Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury, were way to the right and felt that it was not the government's job to
Have you attuned your ears to reading and listening to things and realizing that there's hidden bias? Sometimes not so hidden. Did you hear how he just described Hoover? Anybody? Are you paying attention? What did he say? Okay, what does he mean by way to the right? What does that mean in political speak? Someone's way to the right. Go ahead. Okay, very conservative, right? So again, we're judging Hoover, as I continue my Hoover apology tour, on the way American politics is today. Today, way to the right, conservative would be, hey, government shouldn't be involved at all. Like, hey, we got to make sure we got to let the free market. Today, the big shift that comes with FDR is there's a big shift in the whole spectrum itself. Like, you can, if I was to draw the political spectrum of America on the board, there's the left, there's the right, there's people in the middle, but we can take the whole spectrum from 1920s and move it over here to the left, if you understand what I'm saying. And now there are some people, like for instance, a person that was elected in 1960, President John F. Kennedy, very popular Democrat, right? Would have been considered a liberal back then. You hear a lot of people involved in politics and history today that say JFK would be a Republican today. That's how much our mindset as a country has shifted in those generations over time. So we're calling Hoover way to the right. No, not in 1929, he wasn't way to the right. That was standard American way of thinking. Hey, the business of America is business. Government, get out of the way. Even with, what was the movement we studied 2 chapters ago? From the late 1800s to the early 1900s. What was that whole movement called? Starts with a P. Progressive movement, right? So that had begun where people started to think, well, there are some things that the government needs to fix, child labor and all that. So you can't totally discard it. There were quote unquote progressive liberals at that time, but they were not the majority. They were still a very small minority. The traditional way of thinking about how government should intervene in the economy and households, way different today than it was then. And Hoover wasn't just acting in a vacuum. He was being advised by many people that had the same way of thinking. So way to the right.
Interfere with this. They believed in pure, unfettered capitalism.
By the way, we figured out
And
that
so
the
they did very
dollar
little
difference
or
from then to
nothing
now is about 30
to
times.
alleviate the crash.
That's like $300 billion
They said it would solve itself.
in 36 hours.
The market broke very sharply, and a lot of people were wiped out with it. It was very painful. Almost everybody lost money, as has happened now.
Oh, the market is not so good today. Your stocks look kind of sick. In fact, they all drop down the point each time the ticker sticks. It's estimated that by the end of these 5 days trading, $25 billion worth of personal wealth had simply disappeared. The stock market continues to sag
Times
without
30.
end. Now orders into everything. I figure I'll have about 500 left if I'm lucky. Humble ending to a potential profit not 4 months ago of nearly 100,000. At least, I say to myself.
So in the summer of 1929, he figured he had about $100,000 of value in stocks. What did he just say he has now? 500. Imagine that. Hey, I'm worth about $3 million. 4 days later, I'm worth about $15,000.
I lost all in the greatest panic in history.
I was very lucky. I never lost my job. I did get a cut in salary. Fortunately, my employees were wealthy people. And when they told me about this, they said, why are you smiling? I said, I thought you were going to fire me.
There's a flapper for you. Got that short hair and showing the shoulders.
Losses with black humor.
I am one of the lambs that Wall Street has shorn. When I was a little girl, a patron of ours left me $1 million for my musical education. But I thought I couldn't live on the income of $1 million. So I asked all my rich friends for tips on the market. They gave them to me, and I lost my millions. Now the only thing I have left is this chinchilla coat of mine. From now on, my hands are off the ticker and on the piano keys. And if you're lucky enough to have $1 million, hold everything and don't play the market.
Are you allowed to have a chinchilla coat or wrap these days?
Another performer who had gambled and lost was Groucho Marx. His reckless speculation cost him everything he'd earned. The fate of Alice Austin, the photographer from Staten Island, was also typical of those who had been lured into the market without realizing the risks.
Basically, she loses everything. In 2930, her account is wiped out. And it comes as a shock for Alice Austin. And I don't think she believes it. Like a lot of people, you just can't believe it.
Bobby,
And
nice
she
shirt.
says, all I have to do is to wait.
Roberto.
The market will come back. And she continued
Friends call him
living
Bobby.
as
Clemente.
if she was rich. And Alice Austin mortgaged her house, not to pay her bills, but because she once again wanted to take a fancy trip to Europe.
My father lost everything. He was losing everything when he was 22. He took it magnanimously. When you're 22, it isn't as dramatic. The people around him who were established people in their 50s and 60s and were losing their life savings were in absolute panic.
Not everyone coped with their losses. Although the number of suicides has been exaggerated, to some, it seemed the only way out.
I know that people read about the stories on Wall Street of people opening the windows in their offices and jumping out. That actually happened. That isn't an urban legend. People did commit suicide. People who had worked 30 and 40 years on Wall Street and had amassed fortunes within a period of days lost everything.
I'm sorry I was unable to return the 2 books until now. The conditions down in the financial neighborhood have been such as to keep us working. Yesterday, a woman jumped from the roof of our building, 44 floors, right past our window. I saw her body lying in the street, and the sight was so harrowing that I became half sick.
So what's the point here? Why are we focusing on what happened with the stock market crash so intensely? Because if we don't remember the past, we're doomed to repeat it. And you are growing to be young adults in a world that it seems like we're starting to repeat the same things. We've got this stock market that's this huge bubble, and we have so many people saying, hey, I could do that. It's always going up. And there's a chance that people lose everything they had. It is a very significant, we study wars and we talk about all the tragedy of war and the deaths and the people that we lose in wars, but we don't often want to face that, something like this happens so devastating, has devastating effects on people's very lives as well. Now, hopefully the other lesson I hope you would learn that you don't put your hopes in financial gain, right? Imagine that you are so wrapped up in this material world, so void then of Christ, that because you lose all this material stuff, you literally feel like there's nothing to live for. That's a sad place to be. And hopefully one of the lessons we would learn is that when you put all of your hope and your very existence is based on your only hope for any happiness or joy in your life comes from material gain, that's a very sad place to be. So that's another lesson that we should be learning, especially here at Heartland Christian. Okay, back to the notes on that frightful end. What? We have notes? On a day like this.
How much time do we have left?
Oh, I need the Lord to help me. Okay, can we get that one light on there? Okay, we left off yesterday, I think. Did we get the Holly Smoot tariff yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a big deal. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but this tariff, what's a tariff? A tax on imports, okay? The intention was, again, this is the end of the apology tour for Herbert Hoover. The intention was that by the government infusing $30 million into the agricultural market, that's going to help the farmers overcome their losses, right? Remember the price of wheat went down so much, 3 times. It was 1/3 the price it was 2 years before. So the goal is that we're going to help the farmers, and that's indeed going to help the whole country, right? Well, that was a gamble that lost. The government put $30 million into the economy, and when we look at the outcome after that tariff, we look back and we say, you know what, the net effect was we lost as a country $330 million in actual revenue because of the international trade that was handcuffed because of the tariff. Does that make sense? Because the tariff is going to curtail, is going to make it harder for international trade. Overall, America lost 11 times what they invested. So here's Herbert Hoover, who's handed the reins of this economy that's just roaring down the track, right? Booming, this bull market. He didn't change anything, but one day it all came crashing down, the bubble burst. So he's in charge. You got to fix it. You're the coach. You're the quarterback. You're the president of the country. He tries this, doesn't work. He tries that, doesn't work. He tries this, doesn't work. The problems are so deep in what we created through the 20s. And I'm not even saying I'm blaming the 20s, because who wouldn't want to live in times that are so prosperous, right? But he's going to take all the blame, even though he's trying to do things, but everything he tries fails. What we need to remember about Hoover is, obviously, it wasn't working for him, right? So you could be like this, just happened yesterday. This coach that moved up the college ranks, he's doing great, he's a great coach. He goes to one of the biggest universities in the country when it comes to college basketball. Guess what? It doesn't work. So they just got rid of him yesterday, University of Louisville. Coach was very successful. What happened? I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't work. Doesn't mean that he didn't try. Didn't mean that all of a sudden he's a bad coach. Some situations don't work. That's what happens with Hoover. But it does set the stage for greater involvement. We're about to make a big transition in America. When we get to the 1932 election, America finally says uncle and accepts more government intervention. And again, I remind you of the progressive movement. We are one generation into the progressive movement. So people that have grown up, say in schools in America in the early 1900s, have been taught these things. And so their psyche's kind of changed a little bit. And they're going to be more accepting of more government intervention. Even though the adults like Hoover and all the people that were advising him, most of the people, I exaggerate saying all, were of the mindset that, hey, okay, government can help a little bit, but hey, not too much. It's America. We don't have government controlling things, right? It's going to change because things got so bad and things weren't helping that the people are going to accept greater government involvement. We have to include this. If I say PR, what's that short for? What's PR short for? If I say to someone, hey, you gotta be careful about your, if you're a business, you have a person that's in charge of PR. What is that? Actually, Mrs. Droken this is one of her roles at Heartland. Public relations, right? So you want to always, for your company or your brand, you want to have good PR, right? So we're into the 1930s now, early 1930s, and Hoover's trying this, trying that. He's not totally lost the country, right? But now he has this public relations nightmare. In World War I, when we brought our troops home, there were promises made to our soldiers about this bonus pay they would get. They would get rewarded for their service, right? Well, things are getting so bad that a lot of the veterans from World War I said, you know what, we don't want to wait we want the payment now. This is what was promised to us, and we want it now. The government's in a situation where they're already spending all this money trying to fix things, and so there's a standoff. The veterans want their money now. Well, it wasn't really owed to them yet. They want it now, though. They're hurting. They do this quote-unquote March on Washington. They encamp. They set up these little makeshift shelters, and they stay there. This goes on for weeks. They're really causing a problem in Washington, D.C. We got to stop this. So trying to negotiate, the negotiations aren't working. Someone that we'll learn about in World War II, a famous World War II hero, General Douglas MacArthur, who this is before World War II, so he's in command in the U.S. Army. Hoover sends him in to, quote unquote, take care of this and get these veterans to leave, to stop the protest. Things don't go well. 2 people end up being killed. What 2 people? Who are these people? World War I vets. So imagine it happening today. There's a march on Washington, and it's not like the chaos that happened on January 6th, but it's people, they're protesting, and they happen to all be veterans. And our government kills 2 of them. What would happen? Well, would there be incredible outcry, right? Especially today. I mean, there's cameras everywhere. Everything's instant information. So that's why I put, is this the final straw? Probably. So no matter what you thought of Hoover and, hey, he's trying, this is a nightmare. This is a public relations nightmare. The whole country is finding out that 2 of our veterans were killed by our own military because they were protesting. Bad news. So that leads us to this, a pivotal election in American history, the election of 1932, which is going to pass the baton not only to a new leader, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and to another party. So you had Republicans in control, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, all through the 20s. And America finally says, you know what? By 1932, everything Hoover's tried hasn't worked. They cry uncle and they elect Franklin Roosevelt. And Roosevelt promises a New Deal. That's in big capitalized print because that's what the Roosevelt years are known as. Say it, New Deal. No student of America's education system, when someone says New Deal, every kid should know what that is. That's the program put forth by Franklin Delano Roosevelt that was designed to get us out of the Great Depression by government programs instituted to give people jobs, build up the economy, and get us back on track. I'm going to tell you before we start that this happened in early 1933 because remember, you get elected in 32 and you don't become president until 33. And a look at the numbers tells us that America didn't really come out of this depression until World War II. So again, who gets the blame? Hoover. Who's the hero? FDR. Why is FDR a hero if all of these programs, we stayed in the depression the whole decade of the 30s? How's that hero status? That's my opening question before we get into FDR. But this is the result of the election. You've seen electoral 2016. That's what the map looked like after the 32 election. Hoover's totally lost the country, right? I mean, look, what do you got? Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and Pennsylvania, and Delaware. That's it. Every other state voted for FDR. Even in the popular vote, not just the electoral vote, the popular vote, 57-40. In 2016, actually in your lifetime, never been anything close to that, where one president's that popular. Last time was probably Ronald Reagan, 1984. 57-40. 2016, everybody was staying up real late at night trying to figure out who's going to win because the vote is so razor thin. 2020, same thing, right? Razor thin. Still trying to figure out who won. Wait. Whoa, that's going out. That's going out to the whole world. YouTube Live. 2024, what's going to happen? We can predict it. It's going to be razor close, right? That's the times we're living in. So this kind of vote is incredible. By the way, if you can see, I don't know if you can see that very well, but take a look at the population of the United States, because remember, the electoral numbers are based on population. How many's Ohio got? Can you see it? 26. How many's Florida got? 7. What's that tell you? Can you imagine the population of Ohio being almost 4 times the population of Florida? Oh, by the way, look out west. What do you notice? Look at Ohio's electoral votes and California's. Did you know that just not that long ago? I know the 1930s seemed like 1500 to you, but in some of your grandparents were living at this time, great grandparents, that Ohio had way more people, 4 times as many as Florida, and way more. Whoa, what? Way more than California. Ohio, always prominent.
Ohio on top. Ohio against the world. Cleveland against the world.